Good morning, Baltimore. It is Monday, August 17th, and thank you for tuning in to the latest episode of the Early Birds podcast. I'm your host, Matt Weyrich, alongside Josh Tolentino, who just stepped out of Spider-Man Brand New Day as he sits down to record with us. Josh, are you still kind of feeling the effects of the movie? How was it?
It was great, man. I saw it over at Annapolis Mall. It was, again, a great movie. But we're here to discuss everyone else's superhero, and that is Jacoby Lane, who came through with his audition all summer in training camp, and we're wondering how he's going to do in his first game. And I called it. I was at the BTS show with my fiance last Monday, and I was like, I'm here 119 hours earlier for the Jacoby Lane show. And he and several others delivered in the Ravens preseason opener. But I'm doing good, man. How are you doing?
I'm great. Obviously, Ravens beat the Eagles 24-7 in that preseason opener. We're going to dive into all of that. Back half of the show, talk about the suddenly in playoff position Orioles here, who with their win on Sunday over the Tampa Bay Rays, their third straight, coupled with the Texas Rangers loss, they moved into sole possession of a playoff spot since the first time since April 9th. So suddenly the Orioles, who sold at the trade deadline, are in a playoff spot. A lot to unpack there. We'll do that later on. But first, we got to talk Ravens. Josh was out there at M&T Bank Stadium this weekend as Baltimore looked largely in control for this game, jumping out to a nice early lead, really stifling Philadelphia, playing a clean game penalty-wise. You know, the wins and losses in the preseason don't mean much, but there were a lot of good individual performances as well. So you mentioned Jacoby Lane. We'll start there because that is where the hype train has already left the station, is well beyond sight. Jacoby Lane has had a great camp so far, and I wouldn't say necessarily like turned heads with his performance here. 3 catches for 38 yards, but did reel in a touchdown in this game, showing off the hands, his ability to make catches over the middle and his range. So, Josh, when you look at what Lane did in this game, did it reinforce anything that you had already thought about the young wide receiver?
It just gave him and others who are around him more confidence in his ability. And you look at the touchdown reception, Matt, and we look at the profile of Jacoby Lane. Well, I want to say a majority of his highlight catches, his highlight contested catches in camp, they're down the sideline. They're in typically one-on-one, whether the period itself is one-on-one or they're in full team and he's matched up against the corner in single coverage. They've been in single coverage down the sideline. Again, these balls that Lamar Jackson, Tyler Huntley, they're testing his range, seeing how high, how far he can go. Well, this catch occurred with, first off, not their second string quarterback, but their third string quarterback, who by far, I mean, we need to talk about Joe Fagnano from UConn later on in the show, because he certainly impressed me, just given what we expected, the low expectations on him, and what he was able to perform in that preseason opener. But again, on his touchdown reception with Joe Fagnano, Fagnano connects with him where, Matt? Over the middle of the field. So I think that should excite a lot of Ravens fans, that this wasn't a one-on-one jump ball down the sideline, a fade route. This was a over the middle catch in traffic, and Jacoby able to haul it in like around the 2-3 yard line and use that wide those long limbs to stretch over the pylon and muscle on through. And you mentioned he had 3 catches. Well, his other ones, those were other routes that you want to see out of Jacoby Lane. You know, we saw the over the middle. We've seen in practice single coverage down the sideline. Well, the others were a couple other variety of routes that he were running were drag, zips, things underneath the route tree that you want. Again, he's going to be a dynamic weapon for them, given his height, given his frame, but for him to be able to run those options as well, again, a lot of positivity when it comes to Jacoby Lane, and in my opinion, played very well in the blocking game as well, which is going to be a big responsibility for a lot of these receivers trying to make the roster, trying to get opportunities, and certainly with the tight ends, just knowing how Declan Doyle uses them in the run game.
Yeah, this was really an impressive game for Ravens rookie pass catchers in general. You also have Matthew Hibner going 5 catches for 61 yards. Elijah Surratt leads the team in receiving, 6 catches for 66. Surratt did cough up a fumble in this game, but overall, I think you have to be pretty pleased with what you saw from this contingent. That we've talked a lot about how these rookies are going to be stepping into pretty big roles here, maybe still depth roles and rotational roles, things like that. But this is the way that the Ravens went out and addressed a lot of their depth spots behind some of their stars in some of their primary offensive skill positions was through the draft. So we are going to be seeing a lot of Jacoby Lane and Matthew Hibner at tight end, Josh Cuevas as well, and then Elijah Surratt. These guys are going to be in the mix for playing time all season, and just getting this chance here in this preseason game for kind of get that first look. I think you have to be pretty pleased. Hibner, I have seen some notes on him and his blocking, maybe not the best in this game. That's something he is going to have to take a step forward on, particularly being a guy who kind of helped pave the way for Derrick Henry in that C gap there on the outside. But overall, as far as pass catching and guys that could be options for Lamar Jackson this season, I think you have to be pretty pleased with what you saw.
Yeah, Hibner, by all accounts, has had a pretty quiet training camp this summer through the first 2 weeks. Hadn't necessarily popped off in any of the practices that we've been attending every single day, basically. And for him to, catch that, it was like a 29-yard reception down the left sideline on a wheel route. And another thing to note with Hibner is that a majority of his yards, his receiving yards, occurred after the catch. So you gotta love any time that you're getting a new tight end here, and he's picking up all that yak. As we know, again, tight end usage in Declan Doyle's offensive scheme and system is up there in comparison to his predecessor in Todd Monken, now the Browns coach. But Matt, we gotta steer the attention towards the number 1 pick, man, because Vega Ioane, I wrote this in my column, I have seen enough. Go ahead and keep him healthy, have him star in those joint practices against the Vikings later this week and the Commanders next week, and he does not need to play these next 2 games, because I have seen enough when it comes to Vega Ioane, and you see the belief and the confidence in the team to select him with their number 14th pick from the very first snap. And the Ravens, they put together a little highlight reel so you can really focus on him from the all 22 camera angle. Man, it don't matter who you are on that field. When it comes to Vega Ioane, he says, I got to earn my keep and I'm protecting my quarterback. He proved that with every single rep that he took in those first 2 series. And, I'm going to highlight a couple of plays here. And I'm sure all of Flock Nation has seen this particular play, but Eagles outside linebacker Arnold Ebiketie, and actually he's also a former Penn State alum, so someone Vega is familiar with, and also someone who has some draft pedigree. I believe was a 2nd round pick a few years ago by Atlanta. So this is not, again, these were the Eagles backups, but he wasn't just going up against nobodies. These are guys certainly fighting for their NFL lives who have came into the league with draft pedigree. And man, he on a clear out block on a Tyler Huntley, it wasn't quite a Tyler Huntley scramble, but he was stepping up in the pocket and then taking off. But man, Vega Ioane just pancakes, mauls him absolutely. With Gerard Lichtenhan was the right tackle during that game. He just completely takes out his guy. Another guy that he had no problem dealing with, Ty Robinson. He was a 4th round pick last year by the Eagles. They have a lot of expectations for him, and for him to really just handle him and stay at the line of scrimmage. Very, very impressive from Vega Ioane. And you wondered, how is the transition going to look from left guard to right guard? Well, it looked pretty seamless, and you got to think that once the actual starter in Roger Rosengarten is playing next to him in a real game, that he'll only continue to improve. And last note on Vega, 2 series for him, and then 6 more series for Emory Jones Jr. at right guard, who Emory Jones Jr., he actually started at left guard, so that's a total of 8 series for Emory Jones, and obviously a 3rd round pick from last year, so there is that draft pedigree attached to Emory, and they want to see what they got out of him. Very up and down day for him, but to know that he is the backup right now to Vega Ioane. You got Simpson over there on the left side. I'm kind of getting on board with this group that Dwayne Ledford is preparing. Danny Pinner there at center as we get closer to the regular season opener at Indianapolis, how this offensive line is shaking out.
Yeah, definitely some plays there where Emory Jones looked a little bit outmatched. I can think of one particular sack of Tyler Huntley earlier in the game. And, it's funny because watching Vega Ioane, these pass catchers were kind of stealing the show, but I kept kind of finding my eye going back to the offensive line, and you could just really tell a big difference between him at right guard versus Emory Jones at right guard. He is truly going to be a force, I think, in this offensive line, and getting the chance to play next to Danny Pinter at center, who got the start there. We did not see Ethan Pocic until the fourth quarter, so it definitely looks like they are very much easing in Pocic right now, but also this looks like Danny Pinter's job to lose at that center spot, so really interesting how that has kind of developed here, showing a lot of faith in him. It's going to be interesting to see what that looks like here as camp progresses. You talked about
they didn't lose much of
quarterbacks.
a beat too. Also on when Jovan Gwynn, their second string center, came in, and I think how well he played maybe might have factored in on how long they kept him in there. So certainly Ethan Pocic. Mike Preston and I were having this conversation, and he's observed Ethan in one-on-ones, who is coming off that serious injury from last year, but he said he's held his own. He predicts that Mike is predicting that Ethan's going to be the regular season starter at center. Yeah, their week one starter. But I mean, if you're just if you want to follow the money, he's the highest paid center in that group. But so far, I mean, I think it's Danny Pinter's job to lose, and Gwynn certainly proven his case as well. No Corey Bullock at all at center throughout this game. He actually came in to replace Emory Jones Jr. in the fourth quarter at right guard.
Yeah, I mean, Pocic at the end of the day is the guy you want to keep healthy throughout the year. And if you feel comfortable enough about what you're seeing from Pinter here in camp, maybe you do go into the regular season with him as the starting center and see how he fares, and then work Pocic in wherever he needs to be worked in as things goes on. And you can kind of afford to take a bit more of a patient approach with him coming off of that Achilles injury. So certainly some options there, and Pinter's play is really what is going to determine that here over the next few weeks. Now, you talked about the quarterbacks earlier. Joe Fagnano had a pretty good game, did have a interception in the end zone, but overall some really strong numbers, as well as Tyler Huntley, who looked pretty poised there over his first, was it 2 series that they had him out there for, and then moving over to Fagnano, if I'm correct?
Yep.
I know it was right at the end of the first quarter. Yeah. So both those guys, I mean, at the end of the day, you're not looking necessarily at the numbers, but how comfortable they are and how in sync they are with their teammates here in this new Declan Doyle offense. We saw a lot of plays from under center at quarterback, which is obviously a very new thing for this Baltimore pass catching or quarterback room, something that we haven't seen a lot of operating out of the shotgun. So they're going to be trying to do a lot of trickery at the offensive line and things moving around. But the fact that they only had a couple of penalties on the whole game and the quarterbacks did look as much in rhythm as they were, I think is a great sign.
Yeah, I think we knew we were going to see a lot of Joe Fagnano with Skylar Thompson's season effectively ended, him being placed on injured reserve with an injury we still don't know exactly what it was. When Jesse Minter was asked about it, he kind of raised his right arm and looked at it and was like, it ended up being more serious in terms of a summary of how he was describing Skylar's injury. But without Skylar Thompson there, Joe Fagnano, man, let's get to know him a little bit, because I feel like they're certainly finding confidence in him as he works his way towards making this roster. And certainly is that a practice squad, developmental role, third string emergency quarterback. Yeah, but I mean, when you're in a quarterback room with Lamar Jackson and Tyler Huntley, you are certainly going to take that. And given his performance, 22 of 28, and you mentioned the turnover, and let's break that down a little bit, Matt, because I asked him about it after the game. So leading up to the takeaway, which occurred in the end zone, the back of the end zone. The play before that was actually against the same player. So Kelee Ringo, a player that I actually covered in Philadelphia previously, got to know him quite a bit. So Elijah Surratt, he draws a defensive pass interference, a very questionable call, and Kelee vividly upset, emotional. Again, I got to know him. He's a pretty emotional guy, and I had wondered how he was going to bounce back on the very next play. Well, again, very next play, Joe Fagnano, it's a rollout to his right, and he had 3 options who were rolling with him, and I thought he could have gone underneath to a different receiver, but he held on to it for an extra second long and fires it. He's trying to, again, notably throw across his body as well. And Kelee Ringo, to his credit, came down with a very impressive pick. Kelee, known for most famously for ending the national title game a few years ago for Georgia with his game-winning pick six. But just getting back to Joe Fagnano, again, outside of that mistake, could not have asked for much more. And I'm on board saying this, Matt, and I was telling the rest of the beat this statement on the way up back to the press box from the Ravens locker room. Joe Fagnano, that outing, I know he didn't start, but that outing and what the time that he wasn't there, that was better than any stretch that we saw last year from former backup Cooper Rush. And, you know, Cooper Rush came with money. He came with veteran presence, veteran name. And again, I know it's different schemes, different offensive coordinators, but that was just never a fit here. And Joe Fagnano certainly looked the part of being that third string emergency option for the Ravens.
Yeah, I think that you have to be extremely pleased with what you saw. A guy who came in, obviously being an undrafted quarterback, but for that level, like he was like a pro style passer, and they've always tried to emulate Lamar Jackson, get Lamar Jackson lights in terms of their backup QBs and guys who can run the ball. I mean, we even saw Austin Reed come in for a little bit and Rush scramble for a touchdown there. So obviously they've got guys who can move their legs here up and down the depth chart. But Fagnano, as far as being a passer, really working his progressions well, throwing into some tight windows, a few maybe risky plays there that showed his kind of confidence in his pass catchers and also just as a quarterback in general. So I think you like to see that from a guy who is playing in his first ever NFL game. He certainly did not look timid, which is maybe the concern there especially for a guy who didn't end up getting drafted. But the Ravens have to be super pleased with what they saw from him and really just behind under center here for the entirety of this game. No Lamar Jackson on the sideline. He did an interview and talking about how this year feels different, certainly from an offensive standpoint to start things out here in this preseason game. They have to be feeling that way. Josh, is there anything else on the offensive side of the ball before we go to defense that stood out to you?
Yeah, just really obviously seeing what the sequencing was with this playbook. And I think that the Ravens, they're keeping it, as all teams are in the preseason, very vanilla. But it's, again, a very useful time for Declan Doyle, who called this game up from the booth. And, again, I think that's a tell sign of how he's experimenting, is that this preseason there's 3 games, and 2 of them he's calling from the booth, and 1 he's going to do from the sideline. I believe that's going to be the next one coming up here against the Vikings, but we'll have an opportunity to talk to him and ask him if that's still his plan, and just how his communication from the headset up there relayed down to the field. And it seems pretty seamless again for this group. Again, only 3 penalties, when that has been such a large issue in some of these practices that we've seen in Owings Mills. A very clean operation, and again, it really started at the line of scrimmage with both sides really dominating.
Yeah, Ravens playing their next preseason game, week 2, at the Minnesota Vikings on Saturday. So their only road game here of this preseason before they come back and host the Commanders week 3 next Friday. Now let's look at the defensive side of the ball, Josh. And it was a stifling performance for the Ravens, who really didn't give up much of anything in terms of yardage or points until late in the fourth quarter. And at that point, we've got really deep depth guys in there. It was a really good performance, I'd say, from the secondary, being able to hold the entire Eagles quarterback room to just 83 passing yards on the day. Even Andy Dalton coming out, only going 3 for 6 for 20 yards. It was a couple of passes defended, but really just not providing much windows at all for the ball to be thrown. And 2 standouts for sure were in that secondary in Keon Martin and TJ Tampa.
Keon Martin, man, it was a podium game for him. So, and I told him afterwards that he had a pretty nice Orioles throwback jacket on, and he didn't wear it to the podium. And I was like, why didn't you wear that thing up there? He thought his reasoning was he thought he was going to get fined, which you're supporting the other pro team. He thought it was
what do you get fined for? Wearing logos? Is that not allowed?
I don't. That was his reasoning, and he even threw the first pitch a few weeks ago over at Camden Yards. So. Hopefully for him, if he, you don't want him playing in a situation in the regular season, but just knowing that the depth and the talent is there has to be very assuring for Eric DeCosta, who that is a position that he loves to continuously evaluate, as Sam and I have discussed many, many times again. And this defense under Jesse Minter, again, it was controlled at the line of scrimmage, but certainly back end players contributing to this victory as well. The Eagles 0 for 9 on third down. They didn't, the Ravens did not allow a single third down conversion. So on the money downs, they had everything put together. And from my recollection, Matt, I'm not doing this off any notes, or this is just pure vibes and memory off this game. So happy that football is back. Is that for my recollection, there were a lot of third and longs. For Jesse Minter's defense, Anthony Weaver, to put them in those scenarios where things inevitably get easier once opposing offenses are put in those situations rather than third and short. So for them to win the early downs, to set up those more difficult downs where they're known passing situations and their secondary can really take over, you liked it a lot, but still you want more. Certainly you look at the pass rush group, Mike Green and Zion Young. It was funny, Matt, because when they signed Trey Hendrickson, I think we were all guessing. We even had an episode on what the pass rush, the edge rush group is going to look like. I think it said it all right there with who played. It was Mike Green and Zion Young playing late into the fourth quarter and not necessarily making a lot of noise. So I think you got to break that down on individual matchup basis and just considering who else they're playing with, once they're actually in there, you're hoping that they're playing with a Nnamdi Madubuike, a Calais Campbell, and, not guys who are not destined to make this roster. But with Zion Young, Mike Green, guys with high draft capital over these past 2 years playing late into the fourth quarter, I think that says it all, with Trey Hendrickson and Tavius Robinson expected to lead that group, and, them still waiting for more promise to show up, especially for Mike Green, a second-year player who showed up to camp more defined, certainly from a muscle and stature standpoint. They need him to pop off here as he enters year 2.
Yeah, I'd say if there is a player that you would call maybe the most disappointing in this game, it is Mike Green, for how much we saw him on the field. There was at one point the Eagles ran 3 straight run plays right at him, and he just wasn't able to get off his blocker and make a play. So he had his opportunities in this game. Yes, he doesn't have the personnel around him, but playing against backup second stringers, third stringers, and not being able to stand out there, I wouldn't say is necessarily concerning, but just the fact that he was in this game for as much as he was is kind of a sign that the Ravens are really trying to get an extended look at him to understand what they have in him as a potential rotational edge rusher, number 2 guy, whatever you want to call it. We still don't know exactly what Mike Green looks like when he's at his best at the NFL level, and seems like the Ravens coaching staff doesn't either.
Yeah, and I mean, the challenge for him is that he came with that sack pedigree playing at Marshall his final year in college, but just looking at his stature, I mean, he's always going to be the small in terms of height and weight on the smaller side when it comes to the position. So his way to win is with bend, and we see that a lot, even in the individual drills, Matt, when we're looking at these pass rush drills at camp in Owings Mills, and how much focus he puts on his bend when other guys are turning the corner of the dummy or the mannequin, whatever they call those big targets, is that some guys will literally just run around it. Trey Hendrickson, most notably, has a few viral videos, and again, that doesn't tell you everything about the pass rusher, the accomplished pass rusher that Trey Hendrickson is. But when you see these simple videos of Mike Green really getting as low as he can, and you saw instances throughout this game when that is not necessarily his go-to move, but something that you could tell he really relies on that, and he hopes to win on that. And we have seen him win on that, but the win rate has to come more consistently. And certainly, again, you look at that depth chart with Trey Hendrickson and Tavius Robinson leading the way, a contract year for Tavius Robinson. So he's got a lot of motivation going into this season from those young guys. You just expect and hope for more in the situations where when they are slotted in there, with Jesse Minter expected to rotate them at that position group.
All right, last thing here, Josh. Tyler Loop comes out here and starts his season the way last season ended, missed a kick from 49 yards his first attempt. Did come back to hit a 42-yarder in all 3 of his extra point attempts, but obviously we need to see the leg from him this year. That's the biggest thing. And he had the distance on it. It went wide right, but he's going to have to be able to get it between those 2 uprights with consistency here, as the Ravens will probably look to rely on him more than they did last year when they just didn't use him in those situations and opted to keep the offense on the field. Josh, when you look at Tyler Loop's audition so far, and you judge how his camp has gone versus yesterday or Saturday's game, what kind of stands out to you?
Yeah, Matt, Sam wrote this in his 5 things that we learned, and we've counted every single practice, Matt, and in every single practice, there have only been 2 days or 1 day, and then now you throw in this game where Tyler Loop has missed a kick. So he has had a perfect summer. The only day that he had a miss was at the Ravens stadium practice at the University of Maryland with fans in a stadium atmosphere. And then he opens up the preseason with a miss at M&T Bank Stadium. Otherwise, he has been literally perfect, quite literally perfect. Has not missed a kick in live team periods. But I still am not there with and I certainly understand the frustration from the Ravens fan base, and I don't think there was anything Tyler Loop would have been able to do to ease those concerns in this preseason. He could have been perfect in preseason games, and you're going to have a portion of the fan base who says it does not matter until he's making a kick in real game conditions, week 1, maybe in a situation to win the game as it was in Pittsburgh. So I don't think there's anything that he could have done. He could have been perfect throughout this preseason, and fans are still not going to totally believe in him. I think, again, the confidence is there from the team. I mean, there has to be confidence in him, but that the fact that they don't have another kicker to bring in competition to test him, which I don't necessarily think that they need. And maybe it's more so just hyper focusing in on these misses, because you look at his misses and his misses from before the game when he was warming up, Matt. They were against in facing that same end zone wide right. I don't want to say every single time, but he did miss multiple times, and they were wide right facing that end zone. And he broke it down, and he said in his breakdown of the kick that he's aiming for that right third. Kickers in their operation, they break down the uprights in thirds, and he's aiming for that right third. And man, he's just been aiming wide right in these game-like scenarios, and ultimately that is when it matters. So Tyler Loop, Randy Brown, they got to figure it out quick here to restore confidence and belief in him from the fan base. But again, I don't think whatever he's going to do over these next 2 games is going to solve much in terms of the fans' confidence in him. It's just really, when it comes down to crunch time and when these games matters, can he come through?
Yep, kickers are like relievers in baseball. Your fans are only talking about them when they're not doing well. And like you said, he would have, even if he went perfect through this preseason, I don't think that would do much to quell fans' concerns. They would just not be talking about him, but keeping him in the back of their minds as he still has that lingering last season, the way it ended, need to overcome and prove that isn't going to define him moving forward. So not what you want, the way you wanted things to start for Tyler Loop, but I think still you have to feel largely good about his camp so far with just how well he has done. You want 100% from your kicker, and that's kind of what Ravens fans have been mostly accustomed to over the years with Justin Tucker. That is not always going to be the case, having a Hall of Fame kicker, Hall of Fame caliber kicker, I should say, at kicking between the uprights. But for Tyler Loop, it is going to be something worth watching to see if these missed kicks in games become a trend, and whether or not the Ravens decide to bring in anybody last minute to compete against him. Josh, before we get over to Orioles, anything else, takeaways from this game?
Yeah, last thing, and this is an extension of Loop, is that when Jesse Minter was asked about whether his confidence in him had wavered, is that he brought up Ryan Eckley, and that the fact that he's a first time holder, and we don't obviously have the close up film to break down the operation, but I wonder if Ryan Eckley contributed to that miss. I think that's just a lazy excuse. I mean, these guys are together every day for every single hour of the day as a special teams unit. And then last note on Ryan Eckley, who is coming here, and it's a tall task to replace an All-Pro in Jordan Stout. The departed punter has gone to join John Harbaugh up in New York. But man, this guy had the best leg in all of college football last year, led the FBS in net average. And I watch him every single day, Matt, and he is booming these 70-yard. And I literally have a video on my Twitter feed from a few days ago at practice, and he was booming like these 70-yard coffin kicks, so the directional kicks. And he had the exact opportunity in the game, his very first opportunity, and he shanks one. And that doesn't even go 30 yards, out of bounds, not inside the 20. He did make up for it for a shorter shorter kick later in the game that landed, I believe, at the 10 was fair caught there by Britton Covey. But that first one, similar to Tyler Loop, that was like, what is this guy doing, man? So you got to give him a preseason game, first game at M&T Bank Stadium. You want to give them the benefit of the doubt, but man, as special teamers, especially as rookies, and in Tyler Loop's case, a second-year player. You need consistency, and that is the biggest thing that they'll be searching for over these next few days.
Yeah, when the lights come on and the seats fill up, it is a different animal at the NFL level, even in preseason. So will be worth watching Eckley as well as things progress here in camp. All right, Josh, let's switch over to Orioles. All right, so I can't believe we're saying this, but here on August 17th, the Orioles woke up this morning and have sole possession of a playoff spot. These Baltimore Orioles, who have played underwhelming baseball for the greater part of the year. These Baltimore Orioles who sold at the trade deadline, including Taylor Ward, one of their best players, Tyler Wells, one of their best relievers, Adley Rutschman, heart and soul of this team, Dean Kramer, one of the longest tenured starting pitchers. These Baltimore Orioles enter play on Monday with 38 games left to play in the season, holding their own destiny for a playoff spot. Josh, as we talked about before this series coming in, they were facing the red-hot Rays, one of the hottest teams in baseball, riding this long winning streak, a completely winning West Coast swing, one of the, I think only the second time in MLB history that a team had ever gone a 9-game West Coast series and won all of them. They come in back home, their friendly confines, a couple of well-attended games as well, and the Orioles have stolen 3 in a row to start this series with one more game on Monday night.
Matt, everyone is reading the agate section now, checking out the wild card standings, and these Baltimore Orioles are in sole possession of the wild card spot. They also are not 500 yet. So I will say though, that I wrote entering the series with the Rays on Friday, so the first game, that they had this. You look at this 10-game stretch that they're in the midst in. They'll host the Yankees when they get back, and the Rays will also come to town as the most important, most critical stretch, and really the season-defining stretch. Well, so far they're past all 3 tests, and I was gonna say that 5-5 would have been a miracle to come out of there, and they're already 3 games, towards that direction, just needing 2 more with 7 more opportunities. So. I think by the manner of which that they are winning these games says a lot in terms of their ability to come through in these situations. And let me just think back to Saturday's game, Matt, when CES, he mishandles a swinging bunt essentially from Junior Caminero, and for him not to be able to handle that ball in a manner to that in Jacob. Calvin Meyer, our esteemed colleague, our Orioles, your fellow beat reporter, he noted that Junior Caminero probably would have been safe if CES did field that ball cleanly. But man, when they are showing the replay of that in slow motion of him just not being able to pick up the ball, it's that what went into my head is, here we go again. Last night's win was great. The surge that they seem to have throughout this game was great, and here they go again. They're going to collapse. The next bullpen arm is going to fail. The bats are going to go quiet the next inning, and look who it is. Tyler O'Neill, he's been hot over these past 2 weeks. Many people have been frustrated him amongst the fan base. I have written on the benefits on, parting from that relationship, and the Orioles and Tyler O'Neill are proving why that they have allowed it to last this long, for him to come through in a big spot there, and then really the offense in all sorts and factions to come through on Sunday. We know that when they are clicking, that what they are capable of, and you just want to see more consistency. And I know they won the series already, so let's get more consistency here as this important stretch continues. And probably more importantly, let's get Craig Albanez, let's get your group to 500 to really be considered taken seriously. But man, this final stretch, again, 10 games, they are proving it through these first 3.
Yeah, 20 runs in 3 games against the Rays is quite the accomplishment here for an offense that really had been struggling coming into this series, having dropped consecutive series against Minnesota, as well as the Rangers, 2 series that I was at. Now we have Jacob out there in Tampa, and all of a sudden they're winning ball games. Maybe I'm the problem. I don't know. We thought it was the other way earlier this year. Jacob was getting all of the series losses, and I was getting all the series wins, but maybe something has shifted here where I'm starting to drag the team down. I'm not sure. But this offense here, we've seen moments like this before, but Pete Alonso, we have to spotlight here, having a great series, hitting leadoff in one of these games with Steven Matz on the mound, using him against the lefty. They push Gunnar Henderson down to the number 5 spot, the lowest he's hit all season. He hits leadoff. He has a calf cramp that he plays through, but is able to come back and play again on Sunday. And on the series goes 6 for 11, and this is so far, obviously, with Monday's game to play. 6 for 11 with a double, a home run, 2 walks, and 3 RBIs. Since May 1st, Pete Alonso leads Major League Baseball with 67 RBIs. Obviously leading the Orioles on the year, has been everything that they could have hoped for so far this season, both from an offensive standpoint, also from a defensive standpoint, from a base running standpoint, leadership, all of that. He has been really the complete package for the Orioles at first base. And really, I think as we look at this last stretch run here, yes, do they need Gunnar Henderson to show more life like he has over the last few days? Absolutely. Could they use Samuel Basallo back here soon, who just started a rehab assignment? Absolutely. But honestly, especially with Adley Rutschman gone, it really does look like Pete Alonso is the engine of this offense, and they are going to go as far as he can take them. And so far, we're seeing what that looks like when he is going right. And certainly in this series has been able to put the team on his back a little bit and help orchestrate some big rallies and come through, hit a couple of home runs, or just one in this series, but a couple of this week. 27 now on the year. Closing in on that 30 mark, and I think he's going to have a chance at 40 if he can finish strong. He's had two months this season where he's hit at least 7. So if he hits a couple more here over the last few weeks to put himself within 7 or 8 or 9 maybe of that 40 home run mark, I think we could see him making a run for that. So certainly the power, not a question for Pete Alonso, and this offense here with him swinging as hot a bat as anybody really seems to be kind of clicking on all cylinders.
Yeah, and obviously a long-term commitment with Pete, and there's always going to be natural skepticism and people wondering what that back end of the contract is going to look like. Don't even worry about that right now, because Pete Alonso is coming through, and they need him to come through. And who else they need to come through? You mentioned him, Gunnar Henderson. You certainly like the direction that he has taken over this past week. Going into that Twin series, Matt, Gunnar Henderson had one multi-hit game since the beginning of July. Over the past week, he's got 2 of those. In those 2 games, he has 7 hits, and you need more performances and plate approaches from Gunnar Henderson in that realm, because as we all know it, when Gunnar is on, and he can be a charging force in this offense, and you pair that with Pete Alonso, who, you said it right there, since the beginning of the May, he leads all of MLB in RBI. So if those two are really going to heat up here, then they are going to be the beneficiaries, the Orioles are going to be the beneficiaries of them manufacturing what hopefully can be a special run for them. If they're out to go on it, though, those two are going to be leading the way. And you mentioned kind of the reinforcements coming in. It makes you wonder. There's certainly part of the fan base that is going to wonder if they continue to tread water here around this 3rd playoff spot over these final few weeks. Where they'd be at with Adley Rutschman on the team would be a remarkable story if they were to go on a run. Again, I still have my doubts, and I want to see the consistency coming in, and certainly a strong for them to finish strong this road trip strong. And by all nature, and as you analyze this trip, I mean, this was, I know the Rays are always going to be viewed in baseball as this small market team, but this was kind of like the Orioles being David, and the Rays were Goliath in this situation with how this matchup was set up with the Rays coming in 9-0, their first time in franchise history for them to go undefeated on the road for that type of stretch, and back to the Trop where they are most comfortable. And you look at the playoff success, and then when it skidded and stopped over these past couple of years, a lot of people in baseball believe it was because they were not playing at home. And you look at their record at home this season, first team to 40 wins, and for them to hit a stall coming off this hot road trip against this struggling Orioles team, this inconsistent Orioles team. You got to love it, and I'm going to certainly continue to, let's continue paying attention to the agate in the wild card standings, because the Orioles have pushed themselves to remain in that conversation, at least for now.
Yeah, and look, they obviously have kind of flirted with coming up to the 500 mark and getting into playoff position throughout the year, but they have not truly allowed themselves to be buried. And you look at the last time they were swept in a series was by these same Rays at the Trop back in mid-May, and it was kind of a rock bottom of their season. They fall to 8 games under 500. They seem well out of playoff position and headed for a trade deadline sell-off and maybe a last place finish again. And that certainly the first part of that proved to be true, but and that being said, the Orioles coming into this series were also in last place, so also still very much in the range of possibilities. But the Orioles haven't been buried because I don't think that you really have been able to look at one particular series since then and say they were truly outclassed. They've been able to hang around and have games that were winnable, and because of a dumb mistake or because of a bullpen arm exploding late, or because the starting pitcher worked inefficiently and gave up a couple of runs before they got pulled. Whatever it might be, they have had instances that have ruined games, but have not really just been soundly defeated for a couple of games in a row. Their longest losing streak over that span, I believe, is 4 games. As I'm scrolling through, that is correct. They've had 2 4-game losing streaks, and that's it. But their 6-game winning streak, the one that wrapped on either side of the All-Star break, really kind of erasing those lows and helping them kind of maintain hovering a little bit around 500 over that span. Since the start of July, they actually have the fourth best record in the American League, behind only the Rays, Red Sox, and Detroit Tigers. So, these Orioles are playing about as well as any team in the American League right now, and that might be hard to fathom considering how maddening of a baseball team this is and how much they have kind of, from a front office perspective, not maybe thrown in the towel, but certainly made it harder for them to get to October. They've hung around, and this team, you got to admit, they're battle tested. They've had multiple big comeback wins before. They've had to, at the end of games, barely hang on, as we saw on Saturday. You mentioned, thought it was a here we go again situation where they were going to blow it. They've had wins where they've had to kind of hang on barely by a thread. They've had wins when they've been down to their final out and walked it off, as we saw with Colton Cowser earlier this year. So for this Orioles team, they need to still show that consistency. We need to see more of what we're seeing here over the last few days on a consistent basis. And I think that this bullpen still has a lot of holes. We're not going to be getting Felix Bautista or Ryan Helsley back anytime soon. Both of them kind of on the mend in their various stops of various steps of their throwing programs, but neither is starting a rehab assignment just yet. So weeks away at best. This bullpen could prove to be a problem, but this offense and this rotation, there are things to like about these two units, and I think we are seeing them kind of both clicking right now in a way that we haven't seen very often, where it's always felt like one unit's been playing well and one hasn't. We're seeing them look like a winning team and playing with a little bit more consistency. Now it's just about, can you kind of build off of this with the schedule really not in your favor, not just playing the Rays, but the Yankees and the Rays again here over this stretch that, as you said, really could end up kind of deciding their season here with just over 6 weeks to go.
Yeah, and you mentioned those two factors of the game, the pitching and the offense, and I think the pitching has experienced this positive regression on what a lot of us expected them to be, and still over this final stretch, we'll see what they become and where they ended up ranking amongst other pitching staffs by the end of the year. But they have experienced a positive regression, and they certainly have carried them here recently, and some anomalies. Shane Baz, after throwing one of his best starts of his career, for him to have a clunker, you hope that he can get back to the consistency that he was on up until that point. Really, it's the offense, and it's can the bats stay hot? That is my biggest thing. And as an aside, Matt, you're not going to say it. You said that they didn't throw the white flag. Michael Elias and the front office, they threw in the white flag. I'll go ahead and say it, that you do not get rid of 4 major league contributors. I mean, we've gone on and on about the face of the franchise, and they're one of their best plate presences in Taylor Ward, a high leverage reliever, a reliable starter. breaking it all down there and retain from that. And I know there's a lot for the future, a lot to like in the prospect capital that was gained in those returns, but get back one major leaguer who just became a major leaguer in Christian Franklin and Alex Hope you throw in there. But really, when you look at what you subtracted and what you added from the major league roster, this front office, they showed their decision and their thought on this constructed roster that was constructed by them in this offseason, and they're proving them wrong and through this first stretch here, this most important stretch rather of their season by winning 3 straight against the hottest team in baseball. So it's kind of like a stick it to the man type moment coming from this clubhouse. You think about the guys who were with Adley Rutschman when he was traded, when he was going to see Spider-Man. Very emotional moment for those guys. Some of them in tears at that moment in the days that followed. And now can they stick it to the front office and show that, hey, we have the talent in here to keep this thing together. Time will tell. We'll see how consistent this group can be. But so far, this 3-game surge against the Rays, you got to love what you were seeing.
Maybe the missing piece was Cam Sanders, who has been brilliant in the back end of their bullpen so far. 6 appearances, a 2.84 ERA, and saves in back-to-back appearances here for the Orioles. 3 total. They've really just thrown him into the fire, and he has been able to kind of step up, not just in those high-leverage situations, but also throwing multiple innings a couple of times. So, we'll see. There's kind of an open bullpen competition. Maybe a couple of these guys will step up. Quite simply, they need to, because somebody in this bullpen is going to have to prove to be reliable late-inning arm to bridge the gap until potentially Felix Bautista returns, which he is throwing bullpens. It seems like he's going to get a couple more lives in and then start a rehab assignment maybe in another week. We'll see. And then Ryan Helsley, who not yet throwing off a mound last I heard. Not sure if that has changed in Tampa, St. Pete, but perhaps that is something that he is able to do here over the next week or so as well. But Josh, this team, just to finish with 83 wins, will have to go 22-16 the rest of the way. So a tall order still. They're going to have to play even better than they have right now and kind of carry that over these final 6 weeks with a tough schedule against several AL East teams here left to go. Josh, as we wrap up here, any final words for the good people?
Yeah, I'm excited to see the reception that this Orioles team gets when they come back home. You've got... Again, they're not quite at 500, but they are very in the thick of the wild card race. We'll see how Monday's result fares, but for them to, I don't want to say sweep because it hasn't happened yet, but for them to have this strong showing against baseball's hottest team, how do the fans welcome them back? And you got Pete Alonso bobblehead night. I believe that's on Saturday, so a special lineup here. They've got their concert festival on Friday, and really just kind of getting to the tail end of summer. This is the last homestand before school starts. So how is this fan base going to respond to the Orioles showing up? I'm very excited to see the type of reception they get, what the ballpark looks and feels like over these next few days, and really just as we continue to get further here towards the finish line when it comes to the Orioles season.
Absolutely. 6 weeks left to go. We'll see how they do. Want to thank you all so much for listening. Don't forget to like and subscribe, give the show 5 stars, and follow us on social media at Sun Early Birds on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook. For those of you who have stick along this late, we do have a fun interview next episode. Sam is sitting down with Zion Young over at Ravens Training Camp for a one-on-one on-camera interview. We're super excited for that, so make sure to tune in next episode there. He's Josh Tolentino. I'm Matt Weyrich. Thank you all so much for listening, and have a good one.